Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Pantoja versus Asakura fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So, Pantoja going into this fight is 28-5 with 8 KOs and 10 submissions, and Asakura is 21-4 with 13 KOs and 3 submissions. This fight is for the UFC flyweight title. Pantoja's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Usyk, and Asakura's last fight was a win via KO in round 2 versus Archuleta. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, UFC flyweight title on the line. Asakura is making his UFC debut and is going straight into a title fight, a world title fight. It's something in which hasn't ever been done before, I believe. I mean, Brock Lesnar, I can't remember off the top of my head if he went straight into one or not, but he's the only person that you can kind of compare to it. But, it's just interesting to see how they are kind of throwing him in. Of course, he's a seasoned mixed martial artist. He's a veteran in that aspect. He's not like, a Brock Lesnar where he's getting thrown in just because of the name. He is someone who's kind of warranted a world title fight to an extent. He is a two-time Rising champion. He was the Rising champion. In his last fight, he won the belt, and in general, the state of the flyweight division, there was needing some new blood, some new names. Realistically, when you look at the flyweight division currently, there's always been a lot of rematches and a lot of even trilogy type fights. There's been quite a few of them as well. When you look at them, when you look at the division, it's just in an interesting position, and I think it's always kind of has been. There's not really been that many names that's been able to, come through and have a lot of success, and there's been multiple times in which the division's been talked about getting cut and getting removed from the UFC, and in general, I think it's great that it hasn't because it's brought a lot of entertainment, and I like it as a division. I think even if you're going to be rematching fights, then I still think they can be entertaining, and I don't mind it. And this offers a new thing. I think a new bit of life into the division. I think there is a clear winner in which the UFC want, being that of Asakura, because I think it opens up new possibilities. It means you can have a rematch if it's a close fight. It means you can fight him against all the top contenders who he hasn't faced. A Brandon Moreno, a Roy Val. Kai Kara France, like I say, there's multiple names in which you can put him against, and it just kind of brings that new lease of life into the flyweight division. But Pantoja as a champion, he's not getting the credit he deserves. I don't think he's been a dominant champion, and he's been very impressive, and he's going to be tough to beat. And I think he's on like this is his fourth title defense. I'm not too sure. His third or fourth title defense, and in general, like I say, he's been looking impressive. He's been looking relatively, dominant. Not perhaps having the most convincing of displays, but always being in entertaining fights and always putting it all on the line. I just don't think the UFC is perhaps recognizing that enough, giving him enough attention for that, and that's just something, that's just my opinion. Obviously, Asakura as a fighter, he's also popular. He has that rising name, and he's also popular. Two things in which the UFC, I'm sure, have looked at and have kind of taken into consideration putting him into this matchup. He's got a lot of support from Japan. I think Pantoja's got support from Brazil. I think the Brazilian fans really do get behind their own. When he was fighting in that last fight versus Usyk, that was in Brazil from what I can remember, and from the sound of the crowd, they were really getting behind him, and Brazilian fans are always going to do that. But the same with the Japanese fans with their fighters, they're always going to get behind their own, and they've gotten behind Asakura. He's popular. He's built himself a name, like I say, over in Japan, and had a few kind of moments to create hype and have a bit of entertainment surrounding him in Ryzen. When you kind of think about even his last performance, the knee in which he landed was a great knee to be able to get a brutal stoppage, and he's been able to get these kind of big stoppage wins. He's also had that rivalry versus Cape as well, which was a great rivalry. Realistically, it was a back and forth type fights. Both of them, they were both just kind of throwing everything they can at each other, and in general, it was a popular and entertaining rivalry. I think it's interesting to see that Cape hasn't kind of had the same kind of progression in which Asakura has been able to do, even though Cape did win that second fight between the two of them. Just something I wanted to pick up on that I thought was a bit interesting. But again, I think the unknown aspect as well of Asakura to the American fans is something in which is creating hype, because I think it's, just that unknown aspect, just not sure what to expect. That creates entertainment. You can look at a few montages, you can look at a few clips and things like that and be like, wow, he's had some moments. This is entertaining because of the fact that we don't fully know what he's like as a fighter, and he is a bit of, like I say, an unknown to a lot of American fans. Obviously, he's had losses. He's lost in title fights. This, like I said, he's been a two-time Rising champion, but he's also lost at a few occasions in title fights, and he's not, lost loads, but just something that I wanted to pick up on, the fact that he has lost in title fights. He's not a guy coming in who's an undefeated guy who's never really been tested or anything like that. I think he has been tested. Not always been able to come out on top, but in general, majority of the time, he is superior, and can still look very good in at the same time, even if he is losing. And in general, I think it's going to be interesting him coming into the UFC, because with Ryzen, obviously they fight in kind of huge rings, and Asakura is often able to use a lot of the ring, and quite often is moving around quite a lot and things like that. Sometimes he's fighting in a phone booth, and that brings entertainment. But throughout a lot of the time, I think he is moving around, circling around, able to use a lot of the ring. The cage is going to be something a bit different as well. He has fought in a cage earlier on in his career and he's had success, but I think he's probably gotten a bit comfortable fighting in a ring type environment. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with having this lesser space available to him by fighting in a cage. Going on to the rest of this card, it's a great card. Obviously, we were meant to have Muhammad versus Rakhmonov as the main event, but I think the whole card in general is a great card. So even with a title fight, which perhaps the flyweight division is never really been known for being the one that brings in the biggest amount of numbers, perhaps this one can still do that. It's a great card. I don't think it needs a spectacular main event to be able to provide for the rest of the great card. There's fights such as Sterling versus Evloev. That's a great fight, and it's in the prelims. It's low down in the prelims as well, which I found was quite interesting. Hooper's also on the prelims as well. That's a very good fight versus Guaida. I'm sure that'll be interesting. Luque is on the card as well. That's a good fight. Smith versus Reyes is a good fight. Mitchell versus Gracie is an interesting fight. I think it's intriguing to see how Gracie's been given a ranked opponent in Bryce Mitchell. Mitchell's coming off, I still think he's coming off that loss versus Emmett, which was obviously a brutal loss, and nobody's too sure if he's going to be able to come back from that. But Gracie has also not fought in a while. He's not really got the best of records. He's kind of just got that name. So, it's interesting to see how he's been given that shot. Also on this card, two more fights in which I wanted to speak about, which is another two great fights as well. Being Rakhmonov versus Gary. Obviously, like I say, Rakhmonov was meant to fight Muhammad. Muhammad got injured, and that's kind of cut that fight from happening. Gary's come and stepped in. Rakhmonov is been calling out everybody and saying that a lot of guys don't want to fight him. I've also heard Usman saying that he was willing to fight him and things like that. So I'm not too sure if that was the case, if everybody was kind of, ducking Rakhmonov or not, or people just didn't want to fight him on short notice or something like that. But Gary's come and stepped in. Gary, undefeated as well, two undefeated guys against each other, which, to be honest, you rarely see in the higher up rankings in the UFC. You rarely see two undefeated guys go against each other. I think this is a good matchup. It's going to be a good fight. Rakhmonov hasn't been in the UFC for long, and he's also been out for a while as well. He's not had many fights in the UFC. He's progressed quickly. He's been getting all stoppage wins. Again, another guy who's progressed quickly, not as quickly as Asakura, but he has been progressed quickly. He's just had his last performance versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which was a great win for him and a great stoppage, and the first person to submit him. Obviously he's a great name, Thompson, but Thompson has lost, in recent times. He's 40 years of age. He's lost just recently against Buckley, which was quite a bad defeat as well. And he isn't an undefeated guy who hasn't experienced a loss yet. That's what Gary, of course, is. That's what Romanov is, of course. And that's something that's going to be interesting as well. Gary coming in on short notice. He's coming off that win versus Michael Venom Page, which was an interesting fight. It was a close fight. He kind of did get hurt on the feet and did get hit quite a lot on the feet, but he dominated in the wrestling standpoint. So, that's an interesting contest. I think Gary was going to face Buckley. I'm not too sure if that was certain or not. Now we have Covington versus Buckley, which in my opinion is a much better fight. But Gary perhaps doesn't make the fights the most entertaining. Rakhmonov is entertaining because he's, always going to be getting them stoppage wins, in which he has been. I think that Rakhmonov is going to win via submission in round 4. I think Gary makes too many mistakes. I think even when he goes for takedowns, quite often he can, make mistakes when he's going for them and can give up opportunities. I also think he can, being shown he can be hurt on the feet. So this is his first 5 round contest. Same with that Rakhmonov as well, but Rakhmonov was preparing for that 5 round distance. I think that Gary's going to lose. I think Rakhmonov's going to win by submission round 4. Like I say, I think Gary just isn't complete enough fighter yet. Like I said, I think a lot of vulnerabilities were shown versus Venom Page, where Venom Page isn't a bad fighter and he's a very difficult striker to be able to handle. But I think Gary got caught too much. Rakhmonov is not bad on his feet either and could, score a knockout, but I think he's going to get him via submission. If he can get him down to the ground, I think he'll be able to get him his back and, later on into the fight. Gary's quite a long type fighter, same with Rakhmonov as well, but I think Rakhmonov would be able to, stretch him out and then be able to get that submission win. And also on this card is Garn versus Volkov 2, another fight in which is a good fight, a good matchup. The first fight was, Garn dominating really, but Volkov's been on a very good run. He's got the longest winning streak in the heavyweight division currently in the UFC, from what I believe. Well, that's if you count in Aspinall losing versus Blades because of that leg kick that resulted in an injury. Technically, it counts. So you have Volkov, who's got that longest winning streak at the moment. Garn coming off a win versus Spivak, which was his return win after the loss versus Jones, and he looked good in that fight. Spivak looked poor, to be honest. He covered up quite a lot, and Garn was doing well on his feet. He pieced him up on his feet. Volkov is coming off that win versus Pavlovich, where Pavlovich, was still seen as a dominant knockout type artist, but he was just not. He was just kind of throwing in haymakers, not really able to do too much, and perhaps has been shown up as a lesser fighter than what he is. And Volkov was able to win and was able to piece him up on the back foot. I think it's going to be a striking contest between the two of them. Garn possibly may go for a takedown, but I still think he won't because I think he doesn't really want to go on the ground after the experiences he's had with, of course, Jones and Garner as well, both doing that to him. So Volkov, I don't think is going to go for a takedown. I think that Garn's going to win via TKO in round 2. I think that Volkov, under actual technical striking, he struggles. I think he isn't an amazingly good fighter still. I think he's still, able to have success with rangy strikes and utilize that, but that's because in that last fight versus Pavlovich, he was kind of just allowed to do that. The opponent wasn't able to allowed to do too much. I think some of the lower down ranked UFC fighters are a bit one-dimensional and a bit limited, but I think Garn's striking ability on his feet is just superior to the majority of that of the lower ranked UFC fighters in the heavyweight division, or even mid ranked, or even really high ranked as well. He's one of the best, and I would like to assume that he's going to win via TKO in round 2. Possibly, we could get him versus Aspinall. It's kind of been like not even talked about him versus Aspinall as an option. Aspinall obviously has been waiting for the joint Jones fight. There's apparently some sort of an announcement that's going to happen soon. That's been getting talked about for a while though. So if that fight doesn't happen and Jones doesn't take that fight, then Garn versus Aspinall is still a fight there to be made, and it's still a very big fight. And it wouldn't surprise me if that happens soon. Even if Aspinall loses to Jones, that Garn fight's still available. If Aspinall beats Jones, then that Garn fight's still available as one of the top contenders being Garn. So, it's interesting to see. I'm sure if he keeps fighting and keep winning, then he's going to probably get himself another title shot in the not too distant future, or, another number one contender shot. Going back to the main event though, Pantoja as a fighter, of course, he's a come forward, high pace type fighter. I think they both are. I think they are both come forward, high pace type fighters typically, and that's what's going to gel and make for an entertaining contest. I believe this will be an entertaining, aggressive, attacking affair between the two of them. Pantoja attacks everywhere. You never really are too sure what kind of attack he's going to come in with. Like I say, he's explosive. He's going to be rushing in. He's going to be hard to control. But he could go for multiple combinations on the feet, or he can go for a fast, sharp, quick takedown. You never really know what type of variation we're going to get from him. He's got them smothering type takedowns. He will just kind of suck onto you and then smother you to the ground and just hook you down to the ground and drag you down to the ground, which is something in which he does impressively. He's got mixed attacks, like I mentioned. He's typically going to be the first one to land and typically going to be setting the pace. And, like I say, Sig didn't do badly in that last fight. I think perhaps he could have even won if he didn't go for takedowns at bad times. But uh, in general, I think Pantoja is typically going to be the first one to be into the exchanges. He puts his all into his kicks and will go to the body nicely with kicks. Asakura has been shown in the past to be hurt with leg kicks and be slowed down with leg kicks as well, and that's something in which Pantoja does do and does operate well by doing. He's a pressure type fighter. He's got a good chin as well. I believe both of these fighters have got a good chin. I believe that they can both take a big shot and be able to keep coming forwards. So that's again another reason why I think this is going to be another entertaining display. He's got good takedown defense as well, I believe. Pantoja, I think Asakura's isn't bad either. So again, another thing in which I think they do relatively similarly. And he finds his way to your back relatively well. Pretty much every time in which Usyk was able to get a takedown, he then Pantoja just kind of scrambled, moved onto his back, sucked round onto his back, and was then in a more attacking position. And that happened on multiple occasions. So it's impressive how he was able to do that. Negatives about him, I think obviously it's obvious he rushes in, so he can get caught with shots, and Asakura has a mean knee and will sometimes sit on the back foot. Sometimes he'll rush in with attacks, sometimes he will just sit on the back foot and wait for you to attack and try and time you like he did in his last fight. That's how he got that stoppage win. If he rushes in, Asakura might be able to catch him with a mean knee or, a strike in which he times. He's When he's not fighting at his rhythm, I think he can struggle a bit if you can disrupt his rhythm. He lunges in, he overcommits, he leaves his punches in a bit. I think his balance isn't amazing. I think Asakura's balance is better. He can sometimes shoot a bit too much for takedowns, and when you're just doing it sometimes a bit sloppy at times when he is later on into the fight shooting for takedowns. He can square up when he does square up a lot of the time. I think he doesn't handle scrambles the best. Sometimes, trying to get you down can seem like a bit of a problem if the opponent is going to be willing to scramble, and Asakura probably will be. He tires himself out. I think in general he tires himself out because of the tempo in which he sets. It's an impressive tempo, and the fact that he's able to last as long as he is at that tempo is impressive, but I think he does tire himself out. I think sometimes he can force the fight and he can kind of be staggering about a little bit into the later rounds at times. Asakura as a fighter, he moves well. He is able to move better, in my opinion, than that of Pantoja. He's fast. They're both fast fighters. I think majority of the fighters in the flyweight division is fast, but he's also got fast hands, Asakura, possibly faster and a bit cleaner than that of Pantoja's. He's got them powerful knees, like I say. I think he's relaxed on the ground. Even if he's in bad positions, he's relatively relaxed and able to typically escape submission attempts. And so I'm not too sure Pantoja, even if he goes for a submission, is going to be able to get Asakura. I think it'll be a big statement if he does. He's lively, kind of slash explosive, Asakura. He's got good striking variety. He'll go for them head kicks. He'll go for them knees. In general, like I say, his punches are more got a variety to them than that of Pantoja, who will typically either rush him with kind of like straight shots or go for them leg kicks. He's good at finishing fights. If he has you hurt, he probably will be able to get you out of there. He throws you down to the ground a lot. He's got strong wrestling, so it could be a wrestling matchup between the two of them, which will be interesting to see who would come up on top. He typically fights at a high pace, like I say, as well. He can fight in close or at a mid range, and like I say, escape submissions well. Negatives about him, I think he can be backed up. I think he does back up in straight lines and does get caught. In that last fight, he was getting caught a bit and, has been dropped multiple times being backed up. He can be drawn into exchanges, and like I say, multiple times in different fights, you've seen him be drawn in kind of like just back and forth exchanges where he's just standing toe to toe with both fighters, and that could happen and that could be entertaining, but I'm not too sure who would come out on top between the two of them if they just stood there in front of each other exchanging. He Against on-rushing pressure, I think, like I say, he struggles because, like I say, I think he goes back in a straight line quite a lot and he struggles with that pressure. He can allow opponents to get wrestling positions and allow them to be, comfortable in their positions and just wait out around if he's in a bad position. I don't think he's physically as strong as Pantoja. I think his head can be on the line. Another reason why he can get caught. I don't think he really goes for submissions as much as that Pantoja. Earlier on in his career, Asakura used to go for submissions seemingly often, and had a few in the early parts of his career, but just hasn't really been attempting to go for them as much recently, or having as much success with them as of recent. He can stay in exchanges too long. He's always allowing fights to be competitive. I think sometimes more competitive than they should be, just by him allowing that to happen. He's been hurt, and like I said, I think leg kicks is something in which will damage him. Pantoja is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Pantoja will win via unanimous decision. Again, not what the UFC is going to want, not the things that I suppose the fans are perhaps expecting. But I just think that he's going to be able to wear him down. I think if Pantoja rushes forwards and keeps the style in which he's able to do and mixes up his attacks, kicks the leg, I think he could beat down Asakura's legs. I think the only thing in which Pantoja is going to have to be wary of Asakura's timing. If he can't time him, then I think he's going to be able to land in the onrushing exchanges in which Pantoja offers, and then he's going to be able to win by unanimous decision. And even if Asakura does land, he's going to have to land big to be able to really hurt Pantoja, because again, like I said, I think Pantoja has a good chin as well. So that's what I'm saying. I think Pantoja is going to win by unanimous decision. Then I'm not too sure what happens with Asakura. Obviously, then he's signed with the UFC, so perhaps I don't know what the deal is. Perhaps he might go on to have a few fights against some of the top contenders. A him versus Moreno would be a good fight, or a him versus Kai France would be a good fight. But Pantoja is limited of what he could go on to do next. Like I say, the UFC want that new kind of fresh face in the flyweight division, but if they don't get that, then perhaps Pantoja goes on to fight Moreno for a third time. I'd be here for it. Moreno's coming off an entertaining contest last time versus Albazi, and Albazi perhaps was going to be this boogeyman guy to come through and be able to push for a title fight, but Moreno completely shut him out and dominated him. He, like I say, put on a very entertaining display versus him, and that's kind of given me a new reason as to why I wouldn't mind seeing Pantoja versus Moreno again. Even though it is, I believe, 2-0 for Pantoja for that one. Dvalishvili perhaps could be an option if Pantoja does want to move up. I don't think he will move up, but perhaps he might want to. And Dvalishvili is talking about fighting Piotr Jan again, so perhaps he'd be willing to, accept Pantoja's offer and fight against him instead. I'm not too sure. Or Carl France. I mean, Carl France is kind of deserving of a title fight at this point. He's coming off a win. Obviously, before that, he had multiple defeats, but the Al Bazi one was a very close fight, and you could have really realistically given it to him. So perhaps you could say that he's warranted a title fight. He's been around for a long time, fighting all the top contenders. So, like I say, perhaps that's another guy in which you could warrant the title fight. Perhaps he maybe needs one more before he is allowed to, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you did, need like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.